Well, after a good afternoon, I think we've been into the afternoon now period. My name is Rana Rahal, and I'm very honored to be here with you today in this conference. Well, in the previous panel and in the previous sessions of my colleagues in this panel, I think we had a very good idea about the gender equality importance or women's participation in peacekeeping and mediation. And as a peacekeeper now, I want to take you with me to a mission in Lebanon. And for those of you that haven't heard of Lebanon, Lebanon is a country in the Middle East, very small, but with very big issues in terms of a conflict that is now 40 years old. The United Nations has a peacekeeping mission in Lebanon, which is called UNIFIL, United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon, which has recently marked its 40th year in Lebanon, and it's the second oldest mission all over the world. And I think we are one of the biggest missions in terms of number. We have around 12,000 military and 1,000 civilian working in UNIFIL in a very small area of operation, which is the south of Lebanon. Now, referring to what the ambassador mentioned in her table of the gender index, Lebanon ranks, I don't know if you noticed, as the 5th before the last in terms of gender equality. And as peacekeepers and as people who work in gender equality and peacekeeping missions, this means a lot because it interferes with the way we can engage women. Where are these women? How can we engage them? Are they allowed to get engaged? Is that safe for them? And that depends not only for UNIFIL, but also for you as people who are engaged in gender in peacekeeping. It depends on the mandate of the mission, on the chapter in which the mission is engaged in a certain area of operation. In some countries, like Lebanon, the peacekeepers are considered the guests, the friends. They are invited to be on our land. In some missions, the peacekeepers are considered the enemies because they are deployed by force, not invited by the government of the country. Does that affect the women's engagement? Of course, because it will be very difficult for women to engage in talks or in any kind of interaction with the peacekeepers if it is seen by the community as wrong or as talking to the intruders or to the deployed by force on the land. Now, what I want also to say about Lebanon, it's the first time that we are working on our draft National Action Plan on 1325 in collaboration with UN Women and other organizations in the country. For the ambassador, the government is for the first time involved in this, and this is a first step. Now, also referring to what you were mentioning about religions, Islam is a very big part of the religion of the country. Lebanon has a religious constitution. I don't know if you heard about it, but the government is constituted by 18 religious groups. And the constitution dictates which religion is in the presidency, which one is in the parliament, and in the speaker of the house. So also, does that affect women's engagement as peacekeepers? Also, we have to look at all these when we think of women's engagement, because you don't want to put them in any kind of conflict in their communities. You have to find the proper way of their engagement with you as peacekeepers. It's not only recognizing that women are important for the peace processes, but also how to get them, how to engage them, and how to provide them with reachability and accessibility to the mission as peacekeeping. Now, having said that, I want to end my introduction about Lebanon is that also it is the first time that we have women allowed to get engaged in the military academy. And this is something very important because for me as a Lebanese, when I was younger, and I'm still young, I didn't have the opportunity to be part of the military force of my country. Also the police, until 2 years back, we never saw a woman in police or in police station, or if I want to report a sensitive issue I arrive to the police station, I see a man there from my community looking at me with all the culture in mind, which I will talk about it later. I will not report. I will just go back. So even the mechanisms in the country itself didn't allow women to participate at the national level. So as peacekeepers, we work usually in conflict or post-conflict countries, right? We do not have a mission in Hawaii, and I hope we never have a mission there, because our presence as peacekeepers means problem, conflict, and war. Now, the area where we work, we call it the area of operation, and I want you to have a close look at it, because when we start working as gender affairs officers in an area of operation, we start looking at the profile of the area. What happens usually in these areas? Usually, the government is very busy with the war. I just told you, until recently, Lebanon allowed women to participate in the military academy. We don't have active participation of women in our politics, in our parliament. Until lately, 6 women succeeded in entering the parliament, but that wasn't there in the past. It doesn't mean that it is not a priority for the government, but compared to other priorities like the war, the armed groups, the war in Syria, the borders that has to be protected, all these things makes women's participation in their national governments really not a very top priority. Now, the population in such areas of operation pass through trauma, fear, death, loss of family members is something really very big, which everybody goes through, men or women. And always, if you ask me as Lebanese, it is a volatile environment. We never know when something happens and the war comes back. Every 10 years, we have this trend of a big war that destroys the whole country. And this makes people more hesitant in big changes. So you find unemployment rate is high in these areas in the south where war happened. The poverty, loss of jobs because of destruction of certain big companies. The absence of basic services. Till now, we don't have proper electricity in Lebanon. We pay it twice to the government and to private companies which provide it. And this puts extra pressure on the population. It changes their priorities. And if you look at women in these areas, they are more engaged in things that guarantee that they have basic services. And engaging in new things becomes for them a luxury. The lack of trust in judicial processes and cultural barriers is something also that exists in any conflict area or post-conflict area, not only in Lebanon, especially when women are absent from these processes. If women do not trust the judicial process or the courts or the government entities, which are always or most of the time within the perpetrators category, then a reporting or a communication will be very difficult for these people. So this is just a snapshot of areas of operation, which has all these difficulties where we work. And now I want to take you to the difficulties that we have inside the mission as peacekeepers. In UNIFIL, as an example, we are 43 countries working together. From different cultures, from different backgrounds, different experiences, even different religions, different stereotypes. And believe me, we are loaded with stereotypes about each other, about the area of operation, about what is allowed or what is not allowed. People's past experience in countries like Afghanistan or Iraq is carried to a peacekeeping mission like Lebanon, where the chapter of deployment is very different, where women are very different. And just for you as an example that I will give, one without mentioning the country which was involved in this, one of our troops get lost in one of the villages of the area of operation. So I usually do training on gender integration in peacekeeping operations for military, which is a mandatory course by the mission. And one of the guys say we got lost for 3 hours in a village which is very crowded usually during the day. And it was a big surprise for me. I'm Lebanese, like how can you get lost in that village? And he said we couldn't ask anyone one, there were only women there, like trees. I said, and then he said, oh, we cannot talk to women, we're only men in the car, so what would people think? I said, but you're in Lebanon here. He said, in Afghanistan, I didn't see the eyes of women for 1 year of my deployment. Yes, but this is a very different area of operation. It has a different context. Here you're a guest, you're not there by force, you can talk to women. And this is what is another difficulty for us, the perceptions that arrive with the people coming to the mission. Another difficulty is the new environment internally and externally for these people, the period, the rotation time. We call it in our peacekeeping language tour of duty. For some countries, it is 6 months. They arrive, they need to acquaint themselves with everything, they need to start their job, and before they go, they need to hand over to the next comer. For some countries, it is 4 months. They need to do all of this. To learn about the area of operation, to learn about each other, to know how to operate, how to do your job, also needs time and experience. And this is also another difficulty for peacekeepers in a peacekeeping mission. So it is not as smooth as we see it from the outside, people entering and going out. Another thing is the different level of pre-deployment training. The UN has a certain standard of training for everybody who goes into a peacekeeping mission. But the level of pre-deployment training differs from one country to another, in addition to the gender importance in this pre-deployment training. If the trainer is missing sometimes from the training goes by. And they arrive to the mission without gender training. So, it happens, yes. Yes, it happens, and this is reported, by the way, officially, so it is not something that we are only facing. It's all missions have this difficulty. The thing also that I would like to mention is the language barrier as a difficulty that peacekeepers have. Not all people speak the language of the mission or the language of the area of operation. Assistance in translation is always required, which is provided by the mission through a big unit, which is the language support unit. However, also the peacekeepers sometimes, like you have a full contingent with only one person who speaks English, which is the official language of UNIFIL. And this puts us another time under the difficulty of making sure that the information, the training, reaches everybody if you do not speak the language of the contingent. Now, the last thing is the low percentage of women in peacekeeping. And I think all of you know this. Almost in all DPKO, the Department of Peacekeeping Operation, in all missions, it is not more than 5%. I think now we're doing fine with the 5%. In the last 10 years, it was 3%, not more. So, I mentioned culture many times, and here we had a presentation about perceptions, and with ISIS around the mission in Lebanon also, people become more aware of religious barriers. Our differences. When we talk about culture, it is very important because it is the system of beliefs, the values, the traditions. It is us. It gives us our identity, right? And sometimes, if you look at this, and I like to show it in my classes, all these shape culture. And the closer we get to the cycle, the more difficult it is to affect practices that go under religion, politics, okay, education, history. In many cultures, in many conflicts, history is a very big thing. The way people relate to the conflict, especially when it becomes very long. And referring to UNIFIL again, or Lebanon, the conflict is now, which required a peacekeeping mission of 40 years age, is external conflict. And it has been always led by men, and it is seen as a men's business. Even the UNIFIL barracks are seen as men's places. As I said, only 5% of the force is women. So how do you expect women to come forward, to get engaged, and even for some of them to know that they have this opportunity? We always ask which is really, we are very lucky with the UNIFIL leadership, which is very supportive of gender integration at all levels of the mission operations, and I will get to that in the best practices that are reported to New York lately. We ask ourselves, are women important in peacekeeping operations? And then the answer can come from many people, but peacekeeping operations have existed for a long time, and we were doing fine. We didn't have much involvement of women, but the operation is working. Are women necessary in peacekeeping operations? When we get the answer that yes, they are important, the next thing, do you think they are necessary? Can you function without them? Can you work without me? Actually, no, they cannot, not anymore. When we talk about checkpoints, when we talk about investigation, when we talk about physical checkup, when we talk about refugees coming every day in hundreds, women and girls, to the gates asking for food. And we had, unfortunately, experiences where peacekeepers were part of the perpetrators category, where women asked for food and they were get sexually harassed or assaulted. And the examples are many and very recent. So part of the engagement, what we use to persuade our leadership, which I said is heavily involved in providing support to the gender officers, is it is not only for, we are doing it because we are good and we want to integrate women in the community. It is for the protection of our peacekeepers. False allegation always exists in any peacekeeping operation organization. They know that we have money. The need outside is very big. We have a huge influx of refugees in the country. The country cannot afford them. UNHCR also stopped lately the small help that was provided because of the huge numbers, the absence of budget, the budgetary constraints. So now we can see hundreds of people targeting the gates to ask for medical help, which involves physical checkup, asking for money or asking for food. When you have women at these gates and you have women involved in these operations, it is very rare that false allegations will happen. And this is part of the strategy that we use in keeping women involved in all operations at all levels. Now, my next question was, what added value do women bring, if they bring any? Does it matter at what level women function in peacekeeping operations? The peacekeeping missions were led always by men, except for the last mission in Cyprus, and I think in 1 year we will have the second force commander appointed in Cyprus. It is led by men. The commanders of battalions are usually men. And does that mean that women are not seen as important in such functions? What do you think? Why don't we have women appointed to such leadership positions?
It's like they are not it's not that the women are not capable of, or you know that they are capable of, but the people are not gonna take them serious. It's something that happens a lot here in Mexico.
Yeah.
Especially if you're working with indigenous. Well, if you're talking to men that come from
yeah, we can hear you. It's okay.
that come from some kind of really religious or really misogynist place,
it's difficult to take a woman seriously if they are not used to it.
Yeah. Actually, you have a point in that, and this is also what we hear when we say, why aren't women participating in this meeting at the local level, at the government level, and especially in security, and this is what we get, like men will be taken more seriously if seen in the security section. protection or in the close protection team, this meant same job. However, in the participation of women in leadership positions in military, it is not something that the UN can control or can get by appointment, because back in their countries, they have to have certain ranks and certain paths in military. And for example, to be a force commander, you have to be a major general in the army. And how many armies have this? Women started very late joining military operations, and we need more time for them to reach the ranks that allow them to be in leadership positions. Yeah, but in the meantime, what do we do? Now, just to share some statistics with you, 250,000 to 500,000 women and girls were raped during the 1994 genocide in Rwanda. More than 95% of UN peacekeepers are men. Women in uniform in peacekeeping operations never exceeded 5% in conflict areas where women are more than half the remaining population. Out of 14 peace negotiations in 2011, 4 women only participated on negotiations team. Fewer than 3% signatories to peace agreements are women. Now, the big question out of this statistics, does war have the same impact on men and women, boys and girls? What do you think? No? Who suffers more? Women? Both? What happens to men in war? They either die, participate in the war, get killed, or leave the country. In Brazil only we have 11 million Lebanese, more than the ones in Lebanon. Yeah. So they get wounded, traumatized. If they are captured by someone like ISIS, it's something too much that can happen to them, to men. So men suffer a lot. And women, what happens to women in war?
They have to fill in the work of men. They have to play both roles.
Change of social roles, excellent. And this is something not easy when we see women starting to make decisions which they didn't do before. And in Lebanon, and I don't know how much you are aware of the Syrian crisis, women coming from rural communities where they didn't decide before on where to go or how to live or where to put the children in school, now they are taking full responsibility of their families. So also women have different, war has different impact on women. It's not about, just for me to highlight this, it's not about who suffers more anymore, it's they suffer differently. And we have to recognize this as peacekeepers. So, just to highlight one thing that happens to women and men, both, because conflict-related sexual violence happens to both men and women, but we talk about it more with women because of culture, because in many cultures, women are considered the honor of their men. In Lebanon, honor killing was legal, is still legalized somehow by some articles in the law. If you want to make a problem in Lebanon with a man, talk about his sister or his mother or his wife, where the woman is considered the honor of their man. So conflict-related sexual violence was used as a tactic of war to defy men, to weaken the men, to change the battle terms, to clear geographical areas. It's cheap, one gang rape in one area and the whole area will be cleared. Women's bodies were used to defeat a certain community. The difficulty about conflict-related sexual violence, which involves all the list that you can see in front of you, is that it's a long-term impact. Wherever it happened, it was difficult for peace to be maintained again or restored, because it affects the social fabric of the community, especially when pregnancies happens and the babies of the enemy stay in the community. Now, so who will deal with all these barriers? Inside the mission, outside the mission, with the women, with the culture. Who will provide access to women and girls? It is the women peacekeepers. They act as role models, and I would like to start with this, which is the last on the list. Because in Lebanon, what we heard from the local community when we started deploying full female teams called FAST, as you can see in the photo, which is the Female Assessment Support Team, we started seeing more women pushing themselves into meetings that involve the peacekeepers. We started seeing women contacting the mission to visit our offices and to hold their activities and the meetings inside the mission. With the establishment of the Female Assessment Support Team, we were able to lessen a bit the gap in the number of women in UNIFIL. We started deploying these teams in full patrols, on market walks, to show the community that we have women here. If you need to talk to them, they are there. The second thing that we were able to do to mitigate the challenges that I talked about earlier is the establishment of the military gender task forces. The gender team, not only in UNIFIL, I think in many peacekeeping missions, is very small. We are 3 people only, and we are dealing with 12,000 people to train, to integrate gender into their different operations. So what we did is we made the team very big. We have military gender task forces nominated by all the battalions, all the nationalities that work in UNIFIL. One of the requirements is the languages, which we were able to translate all our training material into the languages of the battalions and train everybody on how to integrate gender into their work with the support of the mission. Well, with this, I would like to thank you for your attention.